All right, we're back to talk aviation again. And Martin, you're back in the land of the flying kangaroo.
Indeed, I still am.
And quite a week in Australia. A lot of news with this horrible thing in Bali.
Yes.
What are they saying about that?
Well, yeah, opinions are divided.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people are saying, oh, well, such is life, and other people are saying it's a scandal, blah, blah, blah. But as in most places, opinion is divided. There seems to be two debates going on. There's, A, the philosophical debate around whether or not any country has a right or any system has a right to take somebody's life. And then B, there's the other discussion, well, did they know what they were getting into? Does that make any difference, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, well, let's see what happens to the tourism industry in Bali. That'll be
Yes.
if any reaction will show, it'll show there, surely. On to aviation, and the big story of the week really is a local one, because we've been talking about this aircraft a bit in the run-up to this happening today, the day that we're making this program, and that is the first service for Sounds Air with the PC-12 Westport through to Wellington. So there you go. It's happening already. And there was good coverage on the local media on TV, and everybody looked happy, and the plane looked good, and it showed it touching down in Wellington, and I think that'll be a good service.
Well, I tell you what, that plane, it's hard to look bad, mate. That's a great-looking plane.
That would be a better performer than the aircraft before that, the Beech, the C-1900, wouldn't it? It would be a bit faster and probably go a bit higher.
I think they're broadly matched in terms of performance, but for a single-engine plane, it performs very, very well.
So not such a bad thing in the end. It was a bit of a shock horror story at the time when Air New Zealand announced the withdrawal of service with the C-1900 fleet, and it's panned out pretty well. Of course, the other thing that happened was, I think it was Air Chatham's turned up in Kaitaia and Whangarei as well. Not too sure with what aircraft. Could have been the Convair, but they're in there now too.
Yes, so it looks like everyone's being taken care of after a fashion, although the interlining agreement still doesn't seem to be worked out, so you will have to pick up your luggage and transfer it to the next plane, etc., etc., but there you go. You remember recently in the news, Christchurch lost a couple of services. I think the one to Japan is gone.
That's right.
And before that, they lost AirAsia X a year or so before.
Yeah, not good.
No, not good, but good. One good thing for Christchurch is that their engine centre is going to be kept busy maintaining the Pratt & Whitney geared turbofans, which Air New Zealand chosen for its 13 new A320 series Neos.
So they'll be an overhaul base, and they'll contract out to all sorts of airlines. And, of course, that engine's going to become quite a common engine, isn't it, after a while?
It will become reasonably common as it now stands, but it could become really common if the CFM LEAP engine doesn't meet its performance guarantees, because sort of 40% of all outstanding orders for the A320 series haven't chosen an engine yet.
Okay, so it's all up for grabs, huh?
So at the moment, it's kind of split. LEAP has a slight advantage, I believe, in overall orders of the 60% which have been placed. 40% are outstanding, and as we've heard, LEAP does have a problem, seems to, or possibly has a problem with its performance. So, yeah, GTF could become real popular real soon.
And speaking of engines, bit of a turnaround, in fact, quite a turnaround in the engine business in the last week or so, with the announcement that Emirates will be going to Rolls-Royce for their next order of A380s away from the Engine Alliance. I mean, that's a lot of engines, dozens of engines at stake here.
It's 200 engines, which is a lot of money in Rolls-Royce's account for future developments of the new engine that the Neo will take. So,
wow.
I think that's the thinking behind it.
Speaking of A380, Emirates and Qantas in this case, they were talking a week or so ago, Tim Clark and I think Alan Joyce, talking about how their relationship was going. And Tim Clark, I think, was quoted as saying that they, being Emirates, had put a huge amount of traffic onto the Qantas domestic network. He also singled out Alan Joyce as well. He said, as long as Alan Joyce is there, this thing's going to work and we're going ahead. So putting a lot of faith in Alan Joyce. What do we make of that? It's been beneficial for Qantas at home. Maybe not so good, though, internationally.
Yeah, I mean, probably in pure accounting terms, it's been great. It's let Qantas stick to their local knitting and help bolster their local market and fend off competition from Virgin Australia and all this type of thing. But in terms of Australia's international image and everything, Qantas was all about being the international flag carrier. They've cut back a lot of the routes, and you kind of wonder how Aussie feels about that. The Flying Kangaroo's not really flying that much overseas anymore.
Yeah, but full aircraft domestically, perhaps.
Pretty brutal competition with Virgin Australia at the moment. So
yeah.
Virgin's become a full-service local carrier.
In the meantime, as Tim Clark said, as long as Alan Joyce is there, this thing carries on and everybody's happy. I wonder how long Alan Joyce will be there, though.
Well, good question, and I wonder how happy they are considering they've just lost one of their A380s for 10 weeks due to a maintenance accident.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
No, you're not hearing much about it, but yeah, apparently it's out of service for 10 to 12 weeks. Happened in the hangar.
Oh, it fell off a jack.
Possibly.
Those usually cause a lot of damage because the jacks tend to then push up into the wherever the points are, into the skin. Oh well, okay, that's interesting. That wouldn't be that would cause a few problems given the capacity of the airline, and that would cause a few problems in the system, wouldn't it?
They're running 747s into LAX now, or one 747 flight a day.
Yeah. Which otherwise would have been sitting there at Sydney under one of those big roofs doing nothing.
Yeah, well, I was up in Sydney last week, and there was one sitting under one of those big roofs. It's probably exactly that one.
It's probably that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of 747s, and I'll put this up for the YouTube viewers, came across this fantastic picture of Saudi Arabian 747-300 Royal Family plane. Well, you've heard of gold taps and the sort of fittings that they put in these super luxurious private jets. Well, this has even got, as you can see, the gold jet pipe end bits. Is that decadence or what?
I suppose if you've got it, flaunt it, eh?
I mean, keeping those things polished and clean, given, the conditions and the heat and the cold, and, they must have someone carried around in the plane that does the cleaning.
Obviously, you would have a jet cowl polisher.
Totally wacky. Incidents. Obviously, there's been the huge earthquake in Nepal, and Kathmandu airport's been choked up and people trying to get out, relief trying to get in, all sorts of transport aircraft going in there, IL-76s, C-17s, you name it. But also the A320 landing almost crash landing, it looked like, at Istanbul, Turkish Airlines. What'd you make of that?
That was interesting, wasn't it? That was very interesting. Came in, apparently hit a vortex or something, hit the wingtip, the engine on the runway, put a severe side loading on the undercarriage, which then subsequently collapsed.
Yeah.
On the go-around, the engine caught fire.
Wow.
And then it touched down and went off the runway. Not as convenient as the Korean or the Asiana accident almost 2 weeks ago, where he touched down 300 meters short of the runway, took out some navigation lights, but actually ended up on the apron about 50 meters from where he would have parked anyway. And so the people got down the slides and were actually really close to their final destination. I bet they were quite happy about that.
Oh, my golly. By hook or by crook, we'll get you there.
They reckon it slid onto the apron within 50 meters of where it would have parked.
How did that happen?
1.1 kilometers down the runway on its belly.
Gosh, that would have been a ride.
That would have got your attention.
Yeah. That's a write-off, obviously.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah.
Everybody's there with a camera, so we usually get to see the damage.
Yes. Now, that Korean one was quite interesting.
Though there was a shot outside, we'll put this up as well, looking outside from the Turkish plane, which showed the damage at the top of the wing. And it looked like if it hit or got caught in that condition that you mentioned, it must have hit extremely hard.
Yeah, I reckon it did, because there was bits all over the place.
Bone shattering.
Yeah. If you hit the wingtip on the runway, a lot of the impact will be taken up by massive amounts of wing flex, which would certainly get your attention, but you wouldn't necessarily feel it that hard. But the side loading on the undercarriage, which caused it to collapse later on, that would have been a big crunch.
Yeah, so it must have been a very hard hit. They must have been moving at considerable speed sideways.
It must have been, eh?
Made for some good pictures. Lucky everybody was okay.
Yeah, and then on top of that, the engine catches fire on the way around. Man,
Well, that would be, I guess
Scary.
they smashed up some componentry around the engine that maybe caused the fire. I wonder what sort of environment those pilots work in and how they'll be treated after an incident like that in a country like that.
Turkey's probably pretty civilized and forward-thinking in that. I mean, Turkey's quite an advanced, pretty switched-on country. I don't think they'll be too draconian. Obviously, they'll follow procedure, but I don't think it's like, perhaps with Korea, where it's probably quite difficult for the pilots ever to operate again.
Now, the continuing saga of the C-17, this is probably getting boring for listeners now. It seems to feature quite a bit in all of our programs over a few months now. But we've been talking about those white-tail C-17s, essentially the very last of the production run. The run-out models, I think they call it in the car trade. Down to 5 now, right? So the Aussies have taken, it was a couple more than that, wasn't it? 7 or 8 originally.
I think it was 7. I think Aussies have taken 2. I think the Aussies are now the biggest non-US operators of C-17s.
Okay. So there are 5 left. And so who's going to take those final 5?
Wow. Yeah.
That's the question now, really, isn't it?
As we've said before, we're pretty sure, and the press seems to be pretty sure that it'll be New Zealand, won't it?
Canada, they already operate them, don't they, Canada?
They got a few, definitely.
Yeah, and the
I see
RAF, of course.
There was another A400 commercial in the newspaper this weekend.
Oh, okay. So they're still
pushing it.
Still got the lobby machine working for them. So it's obviously still up for grabs.
Well, as we've said before, we doubt it. It'll probably be the C-17.
Yeah. Of course, in the face of a disaster like the earthquake in Nepal, we just don't have the machinery to get anything up there, do we?
But there again, in Nepal, what would you send?
Send an A400, mate.
You'd send goodwill and some money, because right next door to Nepal, you've got the Indian Air Force. They've got 50 freighters.
Yeah, that's true.
And hundreds of thousands of people to go and help.
Yeah.
Even a C-17, you could take a search and rescue team, but would you need a C-17 for that? Because actual hardware aid, India's next door, China's just over the border, Pakistan's not far away.
Yeah, they got plenty of machinery there. And the thing is, the commercial flights are all operating anyway without any problem. So
there you go.
Flights. Air New Zealand was announcing or about to announce its next destination in the US of A, last program we did. And they've since done that.
And we discussed the various options, and we did wonder why anybody would want to go to Houston.
I know, we were wrong.
We were wrong. And apparently the reason is, the thinking behind it is that it's less about New Zealanders wanting to go to Houston, which is reasonable.
Texans.
It's more about getting Texans to New Zealand.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no.
Big state, big, huge population. Houston isn't the big city, though.
No, it's not. No, but Qantas flies to Dallas.
Yeah.
In Houston, you'll get all the people from around the Gulf of Mexico. So you'll get Floridians and Louisiana and all of that. That'll be their hub if they're with that particular alliance. If they fly United or whatever.
And then you do the marketing into the market there, put it on through the media there, and start offering good deals and all of that. And
apparently they did some market research, and your average person in that region thought it took up to 30 hours to get to New Zealand, whereas now from Houston direct to Auckland, it'll take about 14.
Yeah. And they're using the 777-200ER. So the older types are being put to, they've all been upgraded, I think, the cabins.
Yes.
So the older types are being deployed there. Well, that's a range issue fundamentally, isn't it? So that's why they're using them.
They've got the legs.
Gosh, they're still useful after all these years.
After all these years. Well, they're not that old. How long have they had them?
No, but I mean, that's been available for a long time.
Yeah, been available for a long time, yeah.
That'll be interesting to see. Then there's Buenos Aires to South America, so they're sort of expanding out.
Yeah.
And, of course, Air Pacific or Fiji Air is operating from Wellington from June. Now, they're offering some pretty good prices, not only between Wellington and Nandi, particularly business class, but they're also offering an economy fare Los Angeles return for $1,290, including GST.
From Wellington.
From Wellington via Nandi. Yeah, so you go to Nandi on the 738, I think they're using, and then their A330-200 to Los Angeles.
That'd be a nice way to go to the States, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't be bad, but for the price, $12.90 including GST.
That's pretty good.
That really shows you that there is a potential, if you think of it like that, as a Wellington to Los Angeles flight rather than just a Wellington-Nandi flight. Well, that shows that there is a viability there for international flights.
Yeah, well, if you're going to fly to Los Angeles, whether you stop in Auckland or stop in Nandi, if the price is right, who cares where you stop?
Well, I can see Hawaiian Airlines being interested.
Yeah, although how would they get from Wellington to Hawaii? Oh, you're talking if they extend the runway and put bigger planes?
Yeah, exactly. That would be a possibility. That's a weekend destination for wealthy Wellingtonians, and especially if you offer good deals out of Wellington, that aircraft can easily do that.
Well, the way Hawaiian's going, if they do enact these plans, it could be one stop to Europe via Honolulu.
That's my point, yeah. So when you start thinking like that and away from the regular hub-to-hubs that you get when you've got countries' major airports linking each other, you get those sort of secondary opportunities via somewhere slightly exotic or whatever, then I reckon that you'd tap into a market.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, if I could get to Europe via Honolulu, I'd probably give it a go.
Of course, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So what's Europe to Honolulu? That's probably about 12, 13, 14 hours all up, wouldn't it?
Well, that's their problem, yeah. I think they think the A330-800 might just allow them to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
The A350 would do it, wouldn't it?
The A350-900 should be able to do it.
Yeah. There could be 2 or 3 of those sorts of route combinations that benefit a place like Welly, in the future.
Yeah, well, you probably do Christchurch, the same thing.
I mean, even airline like Vietnam Airlines, I see they've got their first 787 all painted up. They got the 787 and the A350 there.
Yes, they have.
Got both of them going at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so Houston, let's see how that goes. 787 in the news again. 2 things. First of all, how much of a hit is Boeing taking on each one that they deliver? And the other is I see that United Airlines have their order of 787 or some of their 787s for the 777-300ER. Bit of a turnaround.
Boeing's really, really keen to plug the production gap between the 777-300 and the 777-8 and 9 as they come on stream later in the decade. That they would take a few cuts in 787s to bridge that gap. By all accounts, they're paying around $130 million per 777. Including engines.
Crikey.
Yeah, real cheap.
So that's just to keep people employed and the whole thing set up in a time of transition, basically.
Just to keep the pipeline primed, keep things working. On top of that, American Airlines has deferred a couple of 787s because they say they really need them given the price of oil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then the other news, of course, is that they reckon Boeing's been losing $30 million per plane.
It's quite a bit.
It's a lot.
If you take it out of the cost of producing it, that's actually, quite a bit.
That apparently doesn't include the $30 billion of debt, which they don't have to account for yet. The program that's under their particular form of accounting rules, they don't have to account for. They can just accumulate it until such time as they think the program's broken even, blah, blah, blah. But that's approaching $30 billion, and they're losing $30 million per plane. That'll change this year, though. This year, they reckon they'll start seeing profit, and then they'll start writing that $30 billion down as well.
There's still a bit of water to go under the bridge there yet.
And it seems that although it's a fine plane, it's really not the breakthrough that it was hyped up to be. Yeah. And how could it be? It's a tube with wings on it,
Yeah, true. Yeah.
None of them are. The same goes to Airbus. It's an evolutionary design, slightly different materials, not necessarily much, much better materials. So it's slightly more efficient, slightly lighter, slightly easier to build. But at the end of the day, not an awful lot better.
You might find, though, that in service it's more durable.
And that remains to be seen. And those costs will come out the longer you operate the thing. But they don't know that yet. Nobody does. I mean, Airbus will have the same issue. They're slightly different construction method, but largely the same materials, more of them.
Yeah.
The A350 is even more plastic. And it's going to be very interesting to see in 10 years, are they more maintainable?
Another story that did the rounds in the aftermath of the Germanwings crash is the ability to remotely control an airliner that is obviously has been hijacked or is out of control. Something's happened. It's been some sort of malfunction or crew incapacitation, and you can literally take it over and fly it from the ground. If you can do that, that's a sensible feature to have, isn't it?
Given the complexity and the capabilities of the modern autopilot systems, you wouldn't even have to take control of it remotely. The event of something catastrophic happening, the plane just automatically flies to the nearest suitable airport, beeping a code saying, "I'm coming in, baby."
So if there's some sort of code squawked or activated, the aircraft automatically flies a predetermined sort of standard approach.
Or once it realizes something catastrophic happens, it just starts flying there and squeaking this code, 9999, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Clear the airways, I'm coming in.
Obviously, there's the possibility that sort of thing could be hacked or used in some nefarious way.
Well, it's software. So it'll definitely go wrong quite often, actually. And these planes will be coming in where you least expect them, but safely and controlled.
Yeah, as long as you don't get to the point where at the slightest bit of trouble, the button is being pushed and
screaming baby, I'm going in.
Yeah, like pulling the ballistic parachute on your Cirrus, just because you're scared.
Yeah.
Story from the New York Daily News, Martin. You may remember back to 1996 and the TWA Flight 800, which was a 747-100 heading for Paris from JFK that came down off the coast of New York. And there's been all sorts of controversy surrounding it. In the end, it was found officially that an explosion in the center fuel tank caused it to be blown apart, essentially. But others claim to see some sort of thing, with a flaming tail rise up towards it into the sky and literally blow it out of the sky, saying that it looked like it had been shot down. I see that now the New York Daily News is saying that one of the pilots who flew Obama around before he was the president in the campaign leading up to his first presidency is saying that he thinks TWA 800 was shot out of the sky, and he's saying that it's all based on engineering, that there's no way that that center fuel tank could explode, and the number of flights that that aircraft type had made and all the fuel conditions was just in the millions, and nothing had ever like that had ever happened. And recalled some of the eyewitnesses who saw the missile, so-called, go up. So
I remember that.
This is still a news story. There's still controversy here.
Yeah. I was living in the States when that happened, and I remember flicking over to CNN and seeing the sea full of little bits of burning wreckage, and it looked like those sort of Thai lanterns. And it's only when they zoomed up and you realize, that because it was a calm night.
Yes.
And the rescue helicopters are going out there, and it was just full of little bits of burning wreckage.
Yeah.
It was they reckon they did some harrowing reenactments where they said what quite possibly happened is that the center fuel tank exploded or whatever exploded.
They said that the fuel tank was empty and there was fuel vapor in there, and there was an electrical cable running through with the a particular, I think, insulation that cracked and broke down.
And at the age of the plane, that insulation would have been breaking down. But they reckon the harrowing aspect was that it blew the front of the plane off.
Yes, that's right.
And that the wing and the rest of the fuselage was still intact, and that the passengers would have been sort of flying, and the passengers were all alive until it hit the water.
Yeah, it was 13,700 feet is the quote here that the explosion happened at.
But that missile theory, that happened quite soon afterwards. People were saying, I saw something fly up. Yeah,
there was a wedding party on the beach, couple being married, or I think the after party, but the wedding had been on the beach, and all of them, I think, claimed to see this object rise towards the sky and hit the plane, though other explanations were made for that sort of visual illusion or accounting for seeing things in that way. But it's just interesting when you get someone who's a seasoned pilot who comes out and says he doesn't believe it blew up, that it was actually shot down. But why would you shoot something down unless it's an accident? You're doing some war games and somebody lets something off by mistake.
Because there's all sorts of test areas off the east coast of the States, and that a missile went off course, and they were adamant. I remember at the time people saying, no, something flew into it.
This pilot is saying that very unusually in the early stages of the investigation, before even the wreckage was recovered or was starting to be assembled, they assembled it in a hangar, put up a few shots here, and it does show that there was an explosion around the immediately forward of the wing. You can see the sort of blast pattern there. But he was saying that FBI people got involved very early on in the investigation and also were starting to control access to the wreckage when it was set up in the hangar, which is very unusual for a NTSB investigation to have any involvement like that from FBI. So that raises suspicions that they were trying to keep information quiet,
Or trying to protect what they thought might have been a terrorist crime scene, had a bomb been planted on the plane or something. So
True.
It was very interesting that how sure these people were that something had flown into the plane.
Yes.
And it was just categorically denied. No, none of that happened.
Nothing to see here sort of attitude.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been the first passenger jet to be shot down in that way.
No, there was the DC-9, the Italian airline one that got shot down. Some people might say MH370 might have got shot down by something.
It's possible. Of course, the Americans shot down the Iranian A300 as well in error.
And that was terrible. And, of course, the Russians shot down the Malaysian plane.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, it's Paul Brennan here in Wellington and
Martin Noakes in Melbourne at the moment, and possibly the next show I might be in Singapore.
Oh, that'll be exciting.
Possibly.
All right. Until then, we'll see you around.
See you later.